Welcome to the Mind Body Business Show. The 3 keys to your success is just moments away. Here's your host, Brian Kelly.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mind Body Business Show. What an amazing, exciting evening we have in store for you. And I say we because it's not because of me. It's because of the 2 amazing individuals that you are going to meet in just moments from now. We are going to talk about the secrets. We're going to pull the curtain back and discuss all the secrets that are going to make your live streams more compelling, get more views, get more audience, also how to repurpose them and get even more audience and exposure for you and your brand. And I cannot wait because the 2 experts we have that I have waiting in the wings right now are really on top of their game. They understand everything there is about media and how to get the word out, marketing, entrepreneurship, you name it. We've got a great show for you. I am so excited. The Mind Body Business Show, real quick, what is that all about? It's about being successful. It's about success. And what I did in the past decade or so is I began focusing on and studying only those people that I deemed successful, that in my eyes, they were successful. And what I noticed after some time, this is through personally meeting with them, through reading their books, through listening to their podcasts, etc. And what I noticed were patterns started developing of these successful people. And you might guess it, they fell in 3 primary areas, that being mind, and that is mindset. The people I met that were successful had a rock solid and very flexible mindset. And with that, they have been able to conquer their particular fields of interest in business and in personal life. In fact, one such person that I do know very personally and very closely is joining us tonight that has this very rock solid positive mindset. And yes, in case you're wondering, Jason, it's you. And we have body. What does that mean? That means basically taking care of your body, both physically through exercise. I know that's a 4-letter word to some of you, isn't it? And also through nutrition. Sometimes can be a 4-letter word as well. And what happens is I've noticed that those that have attained and achieved and then maintained a high level of success tend to take really good care of themselves from the body perspective. Now, guys, that doesn't mean you have to exercise so much that you are going to ultimately look like Arnold Schwarzenegger did in his heyday. And ladies, the same is for you. You don't have to look like a supermodel. And it's really not about how you look. It's how you feel. And what exercise and nutrition do for you is really elevate how you feel. And when you feel good, you make good decisions. You feel bad, you make bad decisions. So that's that's another key component of success. And I call these the 3 pillars of success. And the 3rd pillar, that's business. That's multifaceted. So many areas of business. That's marketing, sales, team building, scaling, systematizing. It goes on and on and on. And those that had achieved a level of success that I had aspired to achieve myself had mastered all of these areas, all 3 of them. And there's good news here with business, specifically because it's so multifaceted. The good news is you personally don't have to master every single aspect of it. It would be nearly impossible to. I don't know if we have enough time on this planet to do that. And the good news is all you need to do is find help and delegate and bring in those in your team that do have those skill sets. And then you will have mastered all 3 areas. Once you've mastered mindset, and taking care of your body, and then all of the wonderful areas of business. And to that end, we have 2 very successful people waiting in the wings. And I think it's time to bring them on and share them with you, our viewers, and the rest of the world. What do you think? Let's do it. Here we go.
It's time for the Guest Expert Spotlight. Savvy, skillful, professional, adept, trained, big league, qualified.
And there they are, ladies.
Hey!
We have Annemarie Cross. She is the podcasting queen from Melbourne, Australia. She's coming to us live from down under. Thank you so much for coming on, Annemarie.
It's a pleasure.
Oh my goodness. And my good friend, my buddy, my serial entrepreneur and media expert, Jason Nast, coming all the way from Arizona.
Phoenix.
Yes, Phoenix, Arizona area. And what we're going to do on this show, if you both don't mind, is have a chat. And we're just going to talk as if we were, right before the show started. We're sitting here in the green room, hadn't gone live, and we already started. It's just how entrepreneurs roll. And there's so many wonderful things going on right now. And one thing that I wanted to hit on really hard tonight is that of podcasting, because it is so similar to live streaming. It's just an older technology that existed much longer ago, I'll try to say, than live streaming, video streaming has. And we have an absolute bona fide killer expert with us, Annemarie Cross. Yes, as Jason's pointing up to her like the Brady Bunch video before their opening show. And she is a woman who has been doing this for over a decade.
Just alienated a whole bunch of people just now. I'm just saying that. I'm just letting you know.
What is that?
Not everybody's as old as we are and remembers the Brady Bunch.
That's okay. That's okay. Google it later, the Brady Bunch. You'll see a nice little, the Brady Bunch intro. Do that. But Annemarie, she's been doing this over a decade. She's got a community of over 50,000. And she doesn't just do podcasts in one genre. So that's not easy to do. And she's mastered that. And so we are so blessed to have you on here with us tonight, Annemarie, and actually this afternoon for you in Melbourne, Australia. Thank you so much for coming on. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate that.
Oh, my pleasure. And, one of the things with podcasting is such a great way to share information, knowledge. And, if I can fast track someone's podcasting journey, happy to do so. So looking forward to sharing as much as I can today.
Yeah. And I know I am personally deeply interested in improving podcasting exposure for Mind Body Business, for the Mind Body Business show. And so this is going to be a fun ride. And then Jason is no stranger to all of this either. In fact, years ago, he had a film studio here in Southern California. That's where I'm from. Where they shot various films.
A great place to be from.
Yeah. Shot various films. You did some direct marketing pieces, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And then he did the opposite of what everyone else does. He went from a film studio and went into radio as a DJ, and that's when you landed in the Phoenix area, isn't it, Jason?
Correct. Yeah, I moved from LA just after I left the film industry. I kind of semi-retired, and I don't retire well. I've done it a couple times. I'm not good. That's the one really bad thing. One thing I'm not good at is retiring, and decided to have some fun. So I got into radio instead.
That's funny you say that about retiring, because I just read a book recently. It was Elon Musk, amazing book. I so recommend it for everyone. And there's a great part in it. It's basically he's being interviewed. It's kind of a biography, but he's being interviewed by a gentleman who put pen to paper to write the book with his permission. And at one point, so he asked him about his work ethic and said, "My God, you're like a machine. You never stop. Do you ever take a vacation?" And he said, "I've taken 3. Each and every time I've gone away from work, a tragedy has struck." One example was one of his SpaceX rockets blew up right after liftoff, and he was on vacation. And there were things like that were happening. Of those 3 times he went out, something like that happened each and every time. And he said, "I'm done with vacation. It's hazardous too much."
I'm really good at vacations. There's an old adage that says when you really, really love what you do, you never really need to take a vacation from it.
Yeah.
I just learned how to, when I left the studio and some other things like that, but I just learned how to take my work with me wherever I go. So I love vacations. I just like to work while I'm on vacation, much to the ladies in my life's chagrin.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I just returned, my wife and I, from a cruise, and it was like a 10-day cruise. And I was, with 2 days left, I was good at turning everything off for a good 5 to 6 days. And then I just found my mind wandering back to I can't wait to get back at it. And I didn't have anything with me to get back at it. So I was helping myself not to break the rule, but it was interesting. I was ready about 2 days before the trip was over to get back home and get back into it, doing what I'm doing right now with you. and others. So yeah, I totally get that.
I gotta tell you, that's why I love cruises. I know today you can get wireless and all that sort of stuff on cruises, but when I started cruising, which was almost 20 years ago, you couldn't get wireless, you couldn't get cell phone signal, and it was my one excuse to turn off and not have the ability for people to reach me. And I love that about cruising. So I don't tell people you can get wireless on cruise. I just pretend you still can. So
I mean, 20 years ago, let alone internet, they probably paddled with oars to get you around, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like that. They had guys down below that, did this thing. Hey, I do have a relevant topic I want to talk about right away, if it's okay with you, because there was an amazing thing that just happened, and it ties in live streaming, and it ties in your man, Elon Musk, and it ties in live streaming and marketing, which is my forte. I love marketing, right? So this is an amazing breakdown. I'm sure everybody has at least heard about the new Cybertruck launch. And I didn't do it. Someone else did a breakdown from a marketing standpoint. And I would love to read this to you because it is so freaking great. And this is why Elon Musk is an absolute genius. So first, let's look at the problem that he had. He needed to raise money to build new trucks. So his solution was to spend a few $1 million and build one visually completely off the hook polarizing prototype. And by the way, it does smash Porsche and the speed records and the tug of war with Ford and all that sort of stuff. But then he holds a live stream event. And then he accidentally breaks the windows with a steel ball bearing, knowing that's going to cause tremendous drama and tons of media coverage because he was embarrassed, right? And then he offers a pre-sale for just a mere $100, which you can pre-order the truck immediately after the live stream event. Now, within just a couple weeks or a couple of days, he's going to hit over 200,000 pre-sales. So right now it's over 150,000. So if you take 200,000 times $100, he's already generated $20 million in revenue, in pre-sale revenue.
Yeah.
Now you can go to any of the big boy investors with all this data, rally them together and get their cash. 200,000 trucks at an average cost of at the low end cost of 40,000 is $8 billion. And he should be easily able to raise at least 20% of that, $1.6 billion to develop a truck. His total investment was one prototype truck and a live stream party. That is why Elon Musk is a marketing and business genius right there.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? And talk about the power and leverage of live stream, because that was all live, just having a good time. And I don't know if you watched it. I watched it. I actually shared some of it on my Facebook page during the live stream because I thought it was just brilliant, because I look at things not like a fanboy. I look at it from a marketing fanboy standpoint. I'm just like, oh my God, this guy's brilliant. He brought everybody together in a live stream event. So I was proud. I was proud. I really was.
Yeah, he is a marketing genius. And it's funny because he didn't start out that way in the beginning. He literally self-funded everything. It was crazy. He was throwing his own cash at everything. It's a phenomenal story, but that's kind of like the journey of any entrepreneur, isn't it? We start out, as a solopreneur, not really knowing how to get things done. And then we learn from others and improve and continue to grow. And then it just keeps getting better and better. So Annemarie, the podcasting queen, there's so many things that it is. The interesting thing to me is how old podcasting technology is, how old the idea is, and how now new it has become, because it has become the rage for entrepreneurs. Everybody I've run into, all they talk about is I now have a new podcast. It's so interesting how it's come full circle. And you've been doing this for quite some time, over a decade. And so I'm sure you've seen from, infant stage all the way up through the maturity stage in many people. But if you were to know, Annemarie, and I know you do, if you could call out, for those that are thinking about doing a podcast, what would you say are, the top 3 mistakes that podcasters, either those that are venturing into becoming a podcaster, or those that are even doing it now, what are the 3 biggest mistakes that you've witnessed in your time over this decade that can help people avoid that?
Great question. And there are mistakes that I have made. So all of the things that I now teach and show my clients and other people are what I made. And I think one of the things I said the other day was, the good news is it is really easy to start a podcast. You just pick this up, plug a microphone in, and off you go. But the bad news is it is easy to start a podcast. All you need to do is pick one of these up and off you go. And one of the key mistakes that I made, and I see many other people make, is they don't have a clear strategy. Why are they starting a podcast? To start a podcast because you want to get your voice out there, you want to have visibility and reach, which are obviously outcomes that you want. But why? What is the purpose of your podcast? And one of the things that I find with the clients in the community that I'm surrounding myself with is we're service-based businesses. So ultimately we are selling our expertise, we're selling our knowledge. So you have to have a clear idea on what is the purpose of this podcast? How am I going to integrate it within everything else that I'm doing? What is, and I know that Jason was talking about funnels, what are the processes? What is my customer journey? What does that look like? And how can I integrate my podcast, within that? And so different businesses and different things that they do can really determine the type of strategy. I had one conversation with an accounting firm who was struggling with an area of keeping clients, retaining clients. And one of the things that they were finding was existing clients didn't know about all of the services and product offerings that they have. And one of the accountant partners said, we don't want to seem like we are pitching and upselling when our clients come to see us once a year. So I said to them, well, a clear strategy may be for you to do a podcast where you identify the problems and challenges your existing clients have, create a great case study around that, and then a way to distribute that is not necessarily focusing on externally, so new clients, which you can do, of course, but more internally. How are you communicating with your existing clients so that you can add value, speak into a problem that they're already experiencing, and also let them know that, look, if you're struggling with this, give us a call and we'll set up a non-obligation-free call. So, how are you going to use your particular podcast? What is the strategy that you're going to use? So that would be one mistake first. Starting a podcast just for the heck of starting a podcast. If you don't have an outcome or what's the goal in mind, you're not going to reach a goal if you don't have that in place. The second is, and I'm sure you've heard this before as business owners, niching. Where is the area that you want to really position your expertise? If you start a podcast to try and be all things to all people, you'll speak to no one because you're not really connecting with your ideal client. What are they struggling with? What are they looking for? And bringing that very much unique and targeted message to your podcast episode. So that would be the second mistake. And the third mistake, this is something that I see many business owners, particularly service-based businesses who start a podcast as a way to build reach and visibility, is they haven't clearly defined what makes me unique and stand out in comparison to now thousands, tens of thousands in some industries of other people who are also speaking into that particular area. So one of the things that I learned many, many years ago when I hired some mentors and things that I've come to know too, is that people will come for the topic, they will return for the host. People will come for the topic because they're interested in learning more about that. Yet if you create an incredible experience where you're building engagement with your listeners or viewers, if you're doing streaming at the same time, if you really create an experience that resonates and that makes someone want to come back and experience again, guess what? They are going to return. But often if we haven't defined what that is, your personal brand, what is the reputation that you want to build? How can you bring that over and over again intentionally across all of your podcasts, whether you're sharing on your own or whether you are interviewing one or two or more guests? You want to consistently bring that experience to every show. And that's right from all of your podcast creatives as well. Your graphics, your music, everything creates that experience. And I find when people haven't defined that, their thought leadership brand, message and experience, there's not that consistency there. And when you attract someone to come and listen to that episode, they're not going to be compelled to want to come back because you haven't really created that experience. So that would be the three things that I would focus on first and get those in place before moving on to some of the other mistakes.
Fantastic. My God, it's like you've done this before.
Yeah. You know what? I've made all of those mistakes over and over and over. And then you get to a point, as a business owner, you go, there's got to be a better way. And that's what I found when you really get those things right. When you are speaking to your ideal client and they find you, and then you don't have to have a massive audience. We often, and this is something that we talked about before we went live, people are always talking about numbers. And I said, yeah, but if you are using your podcast as a way to build know, like, and trust, and I think trust is so important, especially with all the mistrust that is going on. And you can build trust far quicker if you're consistent across all of your content. And if you're bringing valuable information through your expertise, people are going to really trust you. And that's, I think, often what's missing because people haven't clarified that yet. They don't really know what that is.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring all those up because all those things fell true when I started doing the live streaming over a year ago. One of my pet peeves were those that would come on and do like interview style shows and they're holding their phone as their camera and it's shaking all over the place. And there was no forethought put into it for quality's sake. And I just, and they're calling themselves professionals. And I'm like, no, you're not. I can't handle this. And so when I created mine, I wanted to make sure it was of the utmost quality in all areas possible, as much as technology would allow, let's put it that way. And technology's come a long way to make creating a quality show in either podcast form or in video form much simpler than it used to be. It used to take a ton more work. And consistency, my goodness, that's a big one. And it's a good point because tonight is an off night for us. Typically, this show airs on Thursday nights, but this Thursday is a holiday. It's Thanksgiving. And so I put a special episode together. And the both of you are here because we had a last minute cancellation. Thank you so much of a guest who was due to appear. And so, the flexibility of rolling with it. But yeah, and niching. Tell me about that one. I love it when you go to someone's YouTube channel and they're talking about dogs in one breath and then race cars in another, and then, just completely different topics. Yeah. And you're like, well, you're all over the map. I'm out of here. I don't see any consistency. I don't. Yeah, you're casting too broad a net for everyone. And then, like you said, the no clear strategy. Yeah, right. Like you said, it's actually. It's a good thing and a bad thing to be so easy to get it started because that's the problem. So many people just grab their phone, like I said, and just start blabbing, start talking. They have no structure. So I agree with everything you said. It rings true. And the guy down beneath us right now, I'm sure he's nodding emphatically, saying the same thing with all of his past film industry expertise and radio. Did you guys follow any kind of pattern, Jason, when you guys were doing shows?
We self-produced one sitcom for one season, and we watched the patterns, we watched the trends, and that, especially when I get into the as seen on TV world, that's all trends. You just watch the trends, who's buying when, what, why, where. It's actually interesting because there's some statistics I wanted to share about podcasting and specifically, and this comes from a website called Convince and Convert. And this is 2019, and these are American statistics. I know we have someone from down under here, but this is what I know, and that is that over 62 million Americans are listening to podcasts on a weekly basis, and that's significant. That's a huge increase. The largest increase since 2003 or 2013 in one solid year. It's huge. But for the podcaster, a big benefit is that now they're saying that people who are listening to podcasts today are more likely to actually buy products and services from the person, from their host or from their guests. And even that 37% are somewhat more likely to do it, which is kind of cool. And then from the other side of it, from the podcast listener side, and this was a huge statistic for me, in America, 41% of podcast listeners are more than likely or likely to earn more than $75,000 per year. So this is a big note because if you're not making 75,000 plus per year, maybe you should start listening to more podcasts. And back to you, Brian.
Oh, was that my cue?
That was your cue.
I actually couldn't find the mute button there. I was muted there, so I wouldn't make any noise during that. Yeah, podcasting is so powerful. It's become the new, it was interesting. So I got a great story on it, and this will be great for Annemarie as well because of the fact that she does this in different genres. Is I just onboarded a couple new apprentices for my team to help out with all of my marketing, and one of them during the interview process, one of them was, he was saying all these things that were in so great alignment with all the books I had read, that were in business and personal development. And so I asked him, I said, wow, it sounds like you are very well read. He goes, actually, I don't read any books. He goes, I listen to podcasts. I was like, oh, wow. And isn't it interesting because I listen to books on Audible. So there's really not a whole lot of difference other than the format and the flow and the duration. And many times some books can take up to 8 hours to listen to. Podcasts can go much quicker, but you can binge listen. So podcasts are extremely valuable. I'm sure Annemarie has several that would fit the mold for people watching right now. In fact, do you have any way that people could find your podcasts out there, Annemarie?
My most recent one is industrythoughtleaderpodcast.com. And that is really for people who they're already experts in their field, but they really want to be seen as authorities, or they feel invisible and they want to go to influential and incorporate a podcast. So I help them go from invisible to influential and profitable with that podcast. We've got Women in Leadership podcast, and also the Christian Entrepreneurs podcast as well.
Wow.
Those are the three. I actually shut down, believe it or not. People were horrified when I told them my very first show that I did after when I started podcasting back in 2008, that was with a co-host called Career Success Radio. We did that for 2 years, and then we kind of parted ways because we both started to transition into different areas. That's what we do as entrepreneurs, don't we? We
Yes.
pivot. And then I started Business Success Podcast, which turned into Ambitious Entrepreneur Show. Now, that's an award-winning podcast, Ambitious Entrepreneur Show, and often is listed in the top business podcast globally. But I closed that down. I stopped production, and people were horrified. And the reason I did that was because I was niching into Industry Thought Leader podcast. I thought I'd teach the stuff because I do it, and I realized that the Ambitious Entrepreneur was too broad, and I was pivoting into really specializing. And so that's what we did in those. But one of the things that we're talking about, kind of audiences and binge listening, that is often what will happen. People will listen to the podcast. They'll love who you are and how you're bringing that content across. And it just makes sense. Sometimes you listen to people and they go, you probably heard it 10 million other times from other people, but just the style that they bring it to I'm going to say airwaves. I know it's not airwaves, but to the podcast, in their style, it just fits. And so people have often said, I've binge listened to your podcast, and I'm thinking, wow, well, we have just spent, hours, weeks together within that. But that's the kind of thing that happens. And to me, it's like, wow, I could not believe it when people would often email me, when's the next episode coming out? And so there's pretty powerful relationship that you can develop with your audience that I haven't quite yet seen with other mediums, other than, of course, live stream. There's really something special about live streaming as well.
Yeah, I can't agree more. That's one of the reasons I got into it, was literally because I used to speak from stage quite a bit, mostly for a mentor of mine. I would speak. He had 2 and 3 day live events, and I ended up ultimately training a full half of his events, so a full day from stage, and I loved it. I just found that I loved being on stage. Did 3 of my own events, and then did a pretty massive transition in my business model, and decided it was time to put the brakes on the live seminars, because those take so much time, effort, and money to put together. But this was kind of my stopgap, my little Band-Aid fix, if you will, so I could still kind of be on stage, if you will, interact with other incredible people like you and Jason, and keep that going. And then over the course of doing this for now several years, I learned that really live video, if you think about it, it's really the genesis of all marketing platforms. And by that, I mean, I don't know of anything you can go farther up the ladder, because you can repurpose a live video. You can go live where people watch you live, you record the video, and then that you can repurpose by putting it on YouTube and other platforms. And then you can repurpose it through podcasts by stripping the audio out. And you can also take the transcribed word from the video, the shows, and make books or ebooks out of them. You can do so many things. It's unbelievable. I've got my apprentices are creating memes, which are graphics with a quote inside of them, directly from the quotes from this show, the past shows. So repurposing beyond measure. In fact, I coined a term called carpet bomb marketing, and that's recently what I'm undertaking at the moment, is an info product on how to do all this. And this isn't a sales pitch. It's just, you got me excited because this is all down that line of, video and everything you were talking about, the Ambitious Entrepreneur Podcast Network. I love that whole thing. I typed in Industry Thought Leaders podcast. That's what popped up. And that's, I love that. We need to collaborate, you and I and Jason, more and spread and cross-pollinate to our respective tribes, because, someone who's a connection for me might not be for you, and vice versa. Both of you.
Absolutely.
Right?
And that's what happens, doesn't it? Because believe it or not, and I often will share this now, people don't believe me, but I'm an introvert. So for me, going to networking events or conferences that I don't know anyone, and I can't carry a microphone. If I'm in front of a microphone or behind a microphone, I'm fine. But you can't go to a networking event, go, "Hi, my name's Annemarie Cross. Who are you?" That kind of, you just don't do that. But I can, interact and interview people. I'm curious. I love to find out, and I learn so much. As you said, reading for me is podcasting, and I learn so much more from people who are on the coalface of innovation and trying things out. And as entrepreneurs, we try things out. Some things work, some things don't, and you learn that consistently. But I find that is a great way to build relationships and connections with other people I would never in a million years would have an opportunity to connect with.
Yeah, and I can't agree more. And I don't know what your thoughts on this, Jason, are, but the format of the show, whether it's podcast or live stream, interview style or talking head, which is one person. I remember originally my thought was, I've got so much information, 55 years on this planet now. I can just go on and spew out my knowledge and, be incredible for everybody. And I thought, how boring would that be? I need to bring other people on. And it turned out that was in my case, a good decision in so many ways. Annemarie, you just mentioned one of them is the relationships you establish with those guests, and you are now part of that guest community, many of them, and you are now coming in contact with their tribe, so to speak, and it just keeps spreading in a glorious way. So being a host on any kind of show like this, where you interview others, there's no value you could put to what you get from it, from those relationships. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Jason, on interview style format versus talking head? Did you guys do any testing along those lines, or have you just witnessed or noticed, or do you have a preference between them as a viewer or as an audience?
Yeah,
I only asked you like 10 questions, so can you answer them all?
We did a lot of testing in that scenario, and the idea behind the talking head is great when you have specific value to bring to your customer, your clients, or your listeners. But when that same voice even on stage, that same voice gets old after time. So you've got to mix it up, in my opinion. I think that the changing of the voice, the changing of the guard, changing of the information, the way the information is delivered. You could all be talking about podcasting, you'd all be talking about marketing, you'd all be talking about vlogging or live streaming, but different voices have a different emphasis on different words, and I think that's really powerful. I really love the multiple guest aspect of it. I know you normally do one guest. I love these chat kind of things that we're doing right now. That really inspires me. Now I have a broadcast that I'm building right now that it is just a talking head. I dispel information that I know. I call it the big insider secrets, because as you said, 55 years on the planet, you don't look a day over 54. I'm 52 on the planet. So I've got a lot of experience in a lot of different markets. I've been blessed to be able to do anything I wanted pretty much my entire life. And as a result of that, I've got experience in many different fields of marketing. And there's some things that, I coined the phrase, it's like, they don't want you to know. And I want to dispel all those rumors and those myths and those hard to get into and those glass ceilings. I want to break it all down and share the inside information for people. So that's kind of my thing to talk about. I still bring on guests occasionally that will talk about their specific niche that I may not be well versed in. And I like that interaction much better. I think the listeners also like that interaction much better. It is interesting. You talk about the evolution of podcasting, and back when I was on the air on radio here in Arizona, that was 1997, 8, and 9. And I was a DJ. I played music mostly. We did stories and stuff like this occasionally, but mostly it was just music. And everybody in the industry at that time was really paranoid about this new thing, satellite radio, and companies like that coming in, like Sirius and even iHeartRadio in the early days, how they were worried about them because they were kind of automated systems. You didn't need a live jock, and all of the DJs were freaking out about it. But it's fascinating to me is that companies like iHeartRadio, Sirius Satellite, they have even gone heavily into the podcast world because podcasting is so prevalent today. And I believe, Annemarie, you're on iHeartRadio as well. Is that right? And I know, Brian, you're broadcasting on Pandora and iHeartRadio. So these are huge markets, and you have to pay it again. As a marketer, you have to watch the marketplace and see who's jumping on board and why. When iHeartRadio is now millions of dollars in ad campaigns going out telling you that they are the place to listen to podcasts, that's telling you something. Back in the day, it was, and it makes me cringe every time I hear it. Podcasts were generally, you get them on iTunes, and I'm not an Apple guy, so I don't have iTunes. So when people say, "Yeah, get my podcast on iTunes," I look at them and go, "Well, you just lost a customer." So if I can't get it on Google Podcasts, I'm not going to get it, and that's just my thing. I'm not going to do that. So I love now that the one podcast can get broadcast and get syndicated to so many different venues so quickly. And that, to me, when you see iHeartRadio jumping on board, Sirius has always kind of been a podcaster or a talk show host kind of thing in the day. But you watch this growth, it's powerful. And a lot of people think it has to be video. It doesn't have to be video. No. When we were in the studio, I was one of the early adopters to pull in a camera, and this was like 1997 and 8 or 9, actually, the latter part of 98 and 99. We had like still ridiculously slow internet speeds and blurry, foggy things. And my camera in the studio, I just did it myself, and it would just take a still shot every 5 seconds so that people could see that there was a live jock on the air, and that gave them a glimpse into my life on the air. And it boosted my ratings like crazy because I was one of the early adopters of that kind of thing. So yeah, I think podcasting is phenomenal and exciting. And that's why, even though I've been in it for so long, I've never done it for myself. I've always done it for other people. So it's been this past 6 months that I've really kind of, talking with Brian and being part of his Carpet Bomb marketing crew and all sorts of stuff, really starting to embrace the idea that I really want to build this business model of this larger podcast and video casting.
Yeah. And one of the things that I say, you never know where your voice ends up. When I was producing Ambitious Entrepreneur Show, I got an email from one of my listeners who was in Zimbabwe. And he said, look, I've been an avid listener. I've made some business decisions and career decisions based on the information you're sharing with your guests. And he said, and I'm now in a local radio station here in Zimbabwe. And I'm one of the program directors. He said, would you mind if we syndicate your show on our local radio station? Hang on a minute. Would I mind? So here I was, in my home office in Hallam, producing this show, and then it was being streamed, and it was inspiring aspiring entrepreneurs in Zimbabwe. And we did that for a couple of seasons, and he still connects, he's connected on Facebook, and he'll often, shout out and things like that. So you never know where your voice ends up. With the Christian Entrepreneur Show, I was interviewing someone from the US who was a teacher, but he also had a part-time business. Now that show was shared to someone who shared it to someone else. It ended up being sent to a local radio station in Perth, a Christian radio show. One of the producers there emailed me and said, would you mind if we syndicate your show? We love what it stands for. So often people will pick that up. And when it's niched and when it's valuable, you've got an idea of the audience that you want to impact and influence. That's the kind of thing that happens, and so people will share their content with you. And that's one of the things that I think with community now, we want to be inspired, don't we? And like-minded people hang out with like-minded people. And if you're able to identify who that person is that you want to be part of that community, you won't have to do a lot of the sharing because they will do it for you. And it's just that snowball effect. But one of the things that you were saying, Jason, I absolutely agree. I always like to observe what's happening in traditional radio. And I don't know about you over in the US, but here in Australia, a lot of the traditional media are struggling with advertising dollars across all platforms, TV and radio. And I'll often have previous radio hosts go, so how are you monetizing your podcast? But now I've seen that one of the major radio stations here has submitted and put together this wonderful brochure for their advertisers, validating the beauty of podcast listenership. So they're now starting to shift the mindset of their advertisers, hey, come and tap into the space. But one of the things that they don't realize is that as podcast consumers, we hear an ad and we're out of there. Like, I don't know about you, but if I hear an ad, it's like, bye. So we need to be mindful about our audience and how we're integrating that to monetize.
Well, it's interesting you bring it up, and I actually have questions about monetization for you. But so about in 2017, I ran a podcast that was a live stream and a podcast on a local radio show here called Money Radio. They brought us in because we were at the time specializing in e-commerce, and we have tons of connections. So we brought in great interviews and things like that. My business partner time is still work with him quite a bit is Jeff Fagan. And we had the e-com power hour on Money Radio in Scottsdale, Arizona. And one of the things that they were saying, like, hey, we can monetize this. We can throw your ads in there. We can do this. We didn't do that at all. What we did was we had a billboard announcement up front that basically said, hey, thanks for listening to the e-com power hour. This is brought to you by, and then a sponsor. And then we wouldn't mention that sponsor again until the end of the show. And at the end of the show, hey, thank you for listening. This podcast was brought to you by in the sponsor's name, which inspired me in one of my businesses to later start sponsoring podcasts. So my one business that I have, we actually sponsor podcasts, and you actually can see it on the top of the screen now. One of my businesses is powertexting.com, and we actually sponsor Brian's podcast and other podcasters as well in a way that helps, because we're finding that our marketing dollars as a business, my marketing dollars, I could go and get Facebook ads, and I can go do Instagram posts, and I can do all these fun things, but I'm getting more bang for my buck out of sponsoring podcasts than I do from actually buying ads in traditional media. And traditional media is my background. I mean, I bought ads in radio and TV and print and magazines and billboards. And we've spent millions of dollars every week on media buy. And I'm actually getting more bang for my buck on sponsoring podcasts than I ever have from just a regular everyday media, traditional media buy.
Yeah. So true. I've often been approached, Brian, when you went to Industry Thought Leader Podcast, that went to my podcast network, which is what I established because I thought I can put it on my own platform or I can create a network, and that's now where we put a lot of our podcasts. But one of the things that I'm finding is a lot of people will say to me, we want to sponsor your show, you want to do that. But one of the things that I do, and you're doing this really well, Jason, I want to point this out for people, you have to, as a podcast host, say yes only to either products or services that you have used or you know about them and it sits with your core values. because I find that if you are sharing something that you wouldn't believe in necessarily or that you wouldn't use, that's going to come through for your audience. And I think that's the difference between, if you see, and I'd love your feedback on this, Jason, that when you see a radio host doing it in traditional media, they may not know that particular product and it kind of comes through. Yet from a podcast host, there's more of a personal relationship with that sponsor or the product or the service. So you can provide a little bit more insight on how you're using it. And if the host is using it and they're attracting an audience of, know, like, and trust and like-mindedness, it means that probably the audience is going to find it valuable too. And from a consumer of podcasts, if someone says, hey, I'm reading this book, or I've got this new app, or power texting, you got to try it out. I'm going to go over there. I've bought so many books and resources from someone who I've listened to. It's kind of like one click and there all of a sudden you're reading it. But that's the kind of thing when you watch your own behavior and you start to look at what other people are doing, when you kind of see that something's working, there's a reason for that. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Jason. It's because there's a deeper connection and there's a real authenticity, if I can use that word, because the host is using it and finding it beneficial.
I agree 100%. When I was on the air doing terrestrial radio, we would get copy all the time, and the copy would say, oh, I love the brand new Chevy Tahoe and blah blah blah. I don't drive Chevy, so I would not say that. I would rewrite the copy myself and say, hey, hearing about the new Chevy Tahoe, it's really amazing. So I would rewrite it because I would never put myself in a first person as a kind of a pitch person for that brand or anything like that, unless I had that personal experience. Now, when I had the personal experience, I talked about it more from a place in my heart and my love of it, then it was a lot easier to personally identify with that. So I thoroughly agree with you. When we did sponsorships, of course, I was in e-com at the time, still doing e-commerce business, but just in a different model. Back then it was more shopping stores and things like that online. We went to our partners, people that we already were working with, that we knew the reputation, we knew the platforms, we knew the products. And so oftentimes we would be talking about them in our show, but we wouldn't be pitching it. And at the end, we would actually give them a .com website to go to or an email address or something. Yeah. Plus, a lot of my interviewees, and you might get this as well, a lot of my interviewees have products. The people that I would bring in for interviews, they have products, they have services. We don't pitch their product, but we let them explain what they do and how they do it and why, and try to bring as much value as we can. And then, of course, we always give an opportunity. Hey, how can they reach out to you? Brian's amazing at that. Hey, how can we reach out to you? How he shows your website and he shows things off. Because when I'm watching you, Annemarie, on a podcast or a video cast, and I'm listening to you, if what you say resonates with me, I want to reach out to you. I want to connect with you. I'm writing down lists of questions I have for you. If I don't get you on this podcast to answer them, I'm going to be hitting you up individually because I want to know these things, because you've already piqued my curiosity. And I think that's the average listeners like that. They say, wait a minute, I like what they said. I want to know more. And so that's a real, in sales and marketing, we call it a real soft sell.
Yeah.
We call it, it's the ability to just educate people. And if they're interested, then they'll come to you.
Exactly. I use the 3 E's with that. You need to engage with people first. Then you need to educate them with some serious value, whilst also enticing them. So what's the call to action? If you get those 3 E's, people can't wait for you to share, how can I find out more about you? And that's where, if you're looking at monetizing your podcast, and one of the things that I say is you set up your podcast so that you can start to nurture listeners into leads, inquiries, and ultimately paying customers. And that is where your call to action, you start off your podcast, if you're a service-based business owner, with your thought leadership. So what we're doing is saying create the first 3 episodes, obviously episode 0, but the first 3 episodes as really valuable content that enables people to build that know, like, and trust in a series. And I can answer how I come up with the number 3. But that, to access that, along with maybe some transcripts, some checklists, some other things that people can get a real good win to solving a solution or an immediate problem, to access that content is part of the opt-in. And guess what? They're now part of your list. So if you've provided real good value, if you're being interviewed, or even on your own podcast and you're interviewing someone else, the call to action at the end of every podcast or alternative podcast is, by the way, we've only just scratched the surface. If you want to know more about how you can go from invisible to influential with a profitable podcast, go and access, and then you would give that URL. So for people who are ready and have been piqued that their interest, they're going to go and access that. And so often I find that business owners will have a lot of different interviews. And I've even asked this question to a couple of people, my clients, but also part of my community. And I said, if you are interested in that host, if they don't provide more information and say for the first 3 episodes, are you left wondering, who are they? Why can I find out more? And I've had, people say, yeah, that is true. That if the podcast host does more interviews, where are their expertise? How can I find out more? So the 3 episodes, make them the first. And Brian, shall I share how I came up with the 3? Why a good podcast series of 3 is a good idea? I think I mentioned to you in the notes that I sent through how I came to decide, you know what, I'm going to get over myself. People have been calling me the podcasting queen for years now. I'm going to rebrand and I'm going to do this now full time. Was after I had the biggest business failure, which now I can say is the best thing that ever happened to me, because I wouldn't be here today speaking with you were it not for that. But after the business failure, I thought, what can I do? I was burned out, and looking back now, I could see I was quite depressed. And I thought, well, you know what? I can't create anything else. My mind is I have nothing else to give. But what I can do is I can ask really good questions. I'm still curious. So that's where Women in Leadership podcast started. I thought I use that as my own healing. I thought I'm going to go out and find incredible women who have overcome hardship, who are doing awesome things, and I'm just going to hang out with them. And I had 3 episodes on my website, and I accidentally got clients from that. And I say accidentally because I set that podcast up not as a way to monetize, but as a way to get over my own healing, to learn, and just buy me over that time. And I kind of took a step back and I asked, well, how did that happen? Why did that happen? And I think all of the things that I mentioned, I had a clear strategy. My website was very much branded around branding and communications at that time. And people had listened to those podcast episodes. They had looked around at my website, and that's why it's so important. You have to be consistent across all platforms. And they know, like, and trusted me. And they pretty much just rang me up and said, we want to work with you. What's the best way to do that? So I thought, well, if I can do that by accident, how can I formalize that, and how can I get that so that it could work for clients as well? So 3 is a really good number for that know, like, and trust. We talk about the customer journey, the buyer's journey, and people have different triggers that they need, different information. So if you incorporate that in the first 3 episodes, it's a great way to really build that the engagement, but also that you are valid, that you can be trusted and integral in your dealings. And so that then prompts them, obviously, with the emails and the sequence that you put into place, creates that beautiful pipeline of people who will put up their hand naturally, who are ready to make that decision. And it just sits in the back end, working for you 365 days a year, every time that you publish another episode, or of course your existing episodes, which will already be found online.
Yeah, it's phenomenal information. Interesting, because a similar thing happened to me. It was by accident, just doing this show. And It came by way of people like you and Jason. When I got done, they kept time and time again. We would do a debrief at the end of the show, like we will do when we're done. So don't go anywhere. But that'll be off camera. And what we'll do, or what they did during that debrief, they say, Brian, can you show me how to do what you do? The live show. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if they only knew everything else that goes on behind the scenes, especially after the show's over, and the marketing that goes out, the podcast repurposing. I'm on 16 podcasting platforms as we speak. And literally after the show's over, I edit it, the video personally. It takes 15 minutes. I was telling you this earlier, Annemarie. I strip out the audio, takes another couple minutes, and then I upload it to a podcast syndication service. And within minutes, it's appearing on all of these 16 podcast platforms. I mean, the same night that we finish, you and Jason will be out there in podcast land even farther than you were before. And that's amazing. And so because I kept getting asked, I used to teach from stage. You must listen to the market. In other words, we love, like Jason and I, we're gadget geeks, right? And we know that we can create the next greatest gadget that everyone's going to love. But the thing is, the market didn't ask for it. And we haven't done our market research to say that they will buy it. Well, I was being told, I was being force fed. It was like, wake up, Brian, the signs are here. They want this. So that's where I just started and created I'm in the process of creating a pretty monolithic, massive info product called Carpet Bomb Marketing, but completely by accident. I didn't start out this show with that intent at all. It was what you said in the beginning, was to build a platform to build that know, like, and trust factor. Ken Spahn is in the house. Hey. Check it out. How you doing, Ken?
Ken's a previous guest on your show. Yeah,
that's right. He was.
Good,
Ken, if you have a question for any of these lovely people that are here with me, please type it in the comments and we'll address it as long as it's appropriate, of course.
While Ken's thinking of a question, though, I have a question. Annemarie, you mentioned you have your own network. Do you host other people's podcasts on that network, or share from there? Or
yes, my clients. Yeah, we give them that platform to share on ours. We have their information that obviously points to their websites. But yes, yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, there was a DJ when I was on the air here. He was on a sister station, and he was the morning show jock, the shock jock kind of guy. And since then, he started his own podcast network here in Arizona, and it's phenomenal how, again, people who held dearly to terrestrial radio are adopting the podcast brand, because it just works so much more efficiently too. Plus the fact that I don't need to have a bazillion-dollar studio. I can for probably under $500, I can have a pretty decent sounding microphone. I use the Blue Yeti, and I have a sound guard. I have a great camera that Brian recommended. And it's a relatively simple process to even start a podcast. And I mean, I used to use, when I first started just kind of playing with podcasts, I used to use an app on the phone called Anchor.fm. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's super easy on your phone. You literally just record talking to yourself and then hit the go button, and it syndicates it for you. And those were simple ways to get started that don't cost anything or very little. Yes, you want to grow your podcast and make it a better quality and over time, but it's a simple way to get started, and I think that's brilliant. So I'm happy that you have a podcast network for your clients. I think that's pretty amazing, because that gives them, like Brian is doing with Carpet Bomb Marketing. We call him, by the way, you're the podcast queen. He's the automation king. What he's doing is kind of giving a support network of his own to help people create podcasts and broadcasts, more so broadcasts, live broadcasts and things, and syndicate them. And I think that's brilliant, because people who have the experience creating their own internal network, it makes it a much faster launch point for several people.
Yeah, it certainly does. One of the things I'd love to you're talking about Anchor, just for people to be mindful of some of those free platforms. Just be mindful about what they do with your content. And I had one client she's now partnered with someone. He was on Anchor, and I said, look, just be mindful of that, because what you ineffectively do is you give them authority, don't you? I think they've changed it now, I've been told. But to be able to monetize it, they'll throw ads in there. And I said, and I'm a brand strategist by trade, if you will. So I'm really mindful about where your voice, what information and what content is kind of aligned with your voice. And if you don't know or haven't given permission about certain ads, people may assume, Annemarie stands for this, or because that's been advertised on her podcast, but it's not really something that I allowed. And also too, I've heard of it happening once, and I can't remember who the platform was, but said, if you are with a host that doesn't have an official business model where they monetize, what happens if all of a sudden they decide overnight, you know what, we don't really want to continue anymore? What happens? You have to scramble. And I have heard this happen once where podcasters had to scramble to get their content and republish and rehost on another platform. So I would always say, be mindful if you're going to build it for the business and you've got your message. And another thing I say is worry about the message before you worry about the make or model of the microphone, because you can't edit compelling content from crap content, you know, if it's not on brand and has that thought leadership. But these are the things, you know, to kind of be mindful of as you're positioning yourself, because it takes time, doesn't it, to build. And you don't want to all of a sudden go down, oh, you know what, we've changed direction. Because people will be thinking, what are they doing now? They were doing this and now they're doing that. And that can impact your reputation too.
It's funny, you know, you have a Christian network, a Christian show, and I know someone who was on Blog Talk Radio.
Yeah.
And they were doing a predominantly Christian faith-based show. And the sponsor was Adam and Eve, which is kind of an adult intimate product company. So it was really awkward for them at that point. So then they had to pay the extra money to get the ads stripped out of their shows.
That is awkward.
So it does happen. But what I was commenting on is that a lot of people are nervous about starting. They don't know how to start. And that's where you can just, you know, you can just practice a little bit. And I've done it where I've just practiced on my recorder on my phone and then listened back to it and said, oh, is that something I would listen to? And then if it is, then you upload it and do something with it. But just simple ways to get started.
Start and practice. If I go back and listen to the very first episode that I did of, we called it Career Communique. You know, when you start off, you try and come up with all these fancy smashy names. It's like, no. So we rebranded to Career Success Radio. But I could really sense, I could hear that I was nervous because, you know, I've never had voice training, but you could hear the voice was kind of up here, like really high, kind of almost, it wasn't that depth. And I cringe. My co-host used to say, oh, because the quality of Blog Talk Radio, it's probably, improved. But back then it sounded like we were in a submarine, you know, underwater and kind of talking through, I don't know what. And he would often say, oh, you listen back to the show. I never listen to my own show because I can't stand the sound of my own voice. That's what we often say, don't we? Yeah. But you improve. And of course you do. You're going to be a lot better, you know, in a month or a year's time. So start now, but be mindful where you do position, you know, with your assets, because you want to build that up and make sure that you don't have to move because all of a sudden these people have gone out of business.
Yeah, it all comes down to like what you were saying earlier is consistency, and it's first get started. And I totally agree with that. And don't worry about being perfect in quality right away, because that will keep you, that will give you the paralysis by analysis type of approach. And the fear mongering will come into your mind and say, well, I can't do this until everything's perfect. I got to have the Blue Yeti microphone because Jason said so. And he's got this awesome camera. So I better get that. Don't let that stop you to get started. And then it's like race car driving. There's a term called seat time. You just need seat time in the seat driving, and you just inherently will improve by just going and doing this consistently, interviewing other guests. And as you were saying that, Annemarie, I was thinking back to the first show I did with a business partner. We called it the Internet Citadel. And I was like, looking back, what kind of nutcase name was that we came up with? And we both loved it, And,
I don't think your second name was all that great either, but that's just me.
Yeah, it was just, and you go through these patterns of growth, but the thing is to get started and start moving. I say this often: if you're in a ship in the water and it's not actually propelling itself going forward, can you change its direction? No. Yeah. But if you are moving forward, but it just turns out you're going the wrong direction, can you correct that course and change it and point it to the right direction? Yes. And correct. So the story here is just get started, move, go forward, and then you can correct the ship. And you may go through several iterations, weaving back and forth until you finally nail it in. And the beautiful thing about these shows, it's just like entrepreneurship. It's something that you never stop working at. And I don't even think of it as work. It's just continual refinement and improvement. As both of you now know, I have many automation systems behind this show. And as of today, I was still refining and improving those automations. It's just a passion. It's just passion that drives it. But we are beyond our 1 hour window. And I know Jason was dying to ask this one question. Is that question, did you get that out already?
I got that question. I got another statement here. This is just interesting. Is that so? My business partner in power texting and several of the businesses is Rhonda Toland, and she's like she has this persona of kind of like a fairy and things like this. So I have this card here that I just pulled up before the show. I do this to kind of get my head to think something differently, and this is very relevant to this. So this is a fairy wand, and on the other side of it, it says, this is random, practice, practice, practice. It says, with daily practice, you can polish your skills and talents and increase your confidence. And this is absolutely true when it comes to getting started with your podcast or your blogcast or your vlog or whatever you're going to do. The key here is start with what you have where you are, because it's never too late to start, but it's always too late to wait.
Love it. Annemarie, do you have any closing thoughts for our wonderful audience?
Yeah, I loved what Jason had to say. And I would say, don't assume that your story is not worth sharing, because somewhere someone is going through the same issues and the same problems and is waiting for you to bring that information and speak to that audience of one. And when you get that just right, that audience will continue to grow. So never think that your story, your journey isn't worth sharing. Share it. Start yesterday. And the second best time is today.
There you go.
And I was going to say the exact same thing you just said, Annemarie, is, so many people think they don't have enough life experience or that they don't have enough value. They haven't got the level of success that others would aspire to. And the interesting thing is, I don't care how young you are, you have value to give and you have things of interest that people want to listen to. And what you start out with, I'll almost guarantee will not be what you finish with as far as a topic. Even Annemarie has several different podcasts of her own. What I started out in business is not where I'm at today. I'm a complete different business model now. That I like everyone saying here in full agreement is get started and then move forward and then be consistent and continue to move forward. Don't ever give up. Don't ever. That's the biggest one. Just don't give up. I had no listeners yesterday. That's it. I'm done. No, you got to keep going, because like Annemarie said, you don't know who's going to see it or hear it or read it, depending on which platform they found your information on. I'll tell you real quick, podcasting. If all of my guests that have been on this show, if you type in their first and last name in Google, many of them will show up on the first page from my podcast stream rather than my live stream on any other platform. And sometimes on multiple podcast platforms on page one, if you search their name. So search engine optimization, you just don't know who's going to watch, who's going to listen, or who is going to read if you have it transcribed and converted into book. So that would be my tips for the evening. I want to say thank you to both of you. I so appreciate you both coming on, especially, there's no especially. Annemarie, all the way from Melbourne, Australia.
Yeah.
And Jason Nast, who had probably an hour's notice, if that. Who's always there. He's got my back. He's one of my best friends on this planet. I appreciate you, my brother. So heartfelt. Always giving great props. And you're looking great, by the way. I'm going to talk to you about that after we get off. But I want to say
it's part of that 4-letter word you talked about earlier, food, but you called it nutrition. But yeah, it's making a difference.
Oh, it shows, buddy. You're looking good, man.
Thanks.
And Annemarie looking gorgeous. We just met, but I'm sure that this is just the beginning of a very long and fruitful relationship between all three of us going forward. I can't wait to basically pick your brain more about podcasting and vice versa. Please feel free to ask anything about live video. I've been doing it for quite a while. And then we've got the man in the middle who's kind of crossed the bridge of all of it and goes, even deeper. So power trio here.
One more question, if it's okay with you. Annemarie, I know that I want to connect with you. Is there a way or a place that people can quickly connect with you?
Well, my website's annemariecross.com, but I love LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a place that I love to connect with people. So just find me, Annemarie Cross, on LinkedIn. So linkedin.com/IN/Annemarie Cross. Let me know that you connected or saw me on Brian's show, and I look forward to connecting and of course with you there too, Jason and Brian.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. Excellent. Because you've had so much great value and information here that I really would like to now I want to start following you and listening to you and hear.
And vice versa. We can all. That's the beautiful thing about it. It's just one little nugget can take your thinking to a whole different direction, isn't it? And think, why didn't I think of doing that. And that's the beauty of the internet and friends that you meet along the way.
And for those of you watching, curious, how do you get guests to come on? How do you find them? You start with one who's a friend who's in a similar niche as you, and then you do what's called a stage swap. You invite them on your podcast or live video, and then they in turn return the favor. And then you get referrals from each individual that comes onto your show. And that's how you can get more and more people. And there's many more resources we could divulge. We could do this for another 5 hours. Easy.
Can I do one more? This is your story, Brian. I'm surprised you haven't said it yet. Like just the fact that you were standing in a crowd of people and they said, what do? You say, I have a show. And then all of a sudden, all these people are shoving their cards. I want to be on your show. I want to be on your show. That's a powerful thing. So yeah, I mean, I know I shortcut the story, but it works.
That was another accident. Yeah. It was in a networking event, two of them, separated by a month each in two different cities, two different states too. And we were at a break and there was a huddle, you know how people huddle during breaks and they talk and get to know each other. And they said, so what do you do? And I just transitioned out of a fitness business into what I'm doing now, which is automation. And what I do now is my show. So I didn't even know what to say. I wasn't prepared. I said, oh, well, I interview successful entrepreneurs such as yourself on a live television show that streams to over 9 platforms simultaneously. And that's the moment, I kid you not, everyone in the circle was digging for their business cards and literally holding them in front of my face. Yeah. And this happened twice. One was a group of males. The second one, the first one was female. And the second one was a group of males. And the same exact, I thought, holy moly, I have an incredible lead magnet with this show by itself. So think about that from a market.
You know how I use it as an introvert? Because for me, going up to someone and introducing myself, but I am more than happy to go, hey, I've got a podcast. I love your content. I would love to interview you. So I use it as a way to introduce myself, particularly to the speakers, because who doesn't want extra publicity? So
yeah,
I heard it said, Brian and Jason, and I can't remember who, so I can't give credit, sadly, that collaboration is the new competition.
Oh, yeah.
We cannot be experts in every area, but we can align ourselves with other experts. So together we can provide a much, rounded, holistic product offering or service offering for clients. And so, when people look at other people as competition, no. It just means that collaborating, you can provide an even awesome service that no one else can really even compare to because you're combining, this thought leadership, this expertise.
Yeah, you can build such a much more massive business through collaboration than you ever could with competition. Yeah. Competition to me is almost like a scarcity mindset.
Yes.
Because they feel they need to compete because there isn't enough in the world to go around. But the exact opposite is the truth. All right, we've got to let you two wonderful people go, and all those that have been watching. Thanks, Ken Spahn, for at least commenting. I appreciate that. He also asked a question, but we just don't have time to get to it. I'm sorry. We'll do that next time. But appreciate you, Annemarie, and Jason. You know how much I love you, brother. Let's do this again, Annemarie. I do want to feature you as the special guest expert coming up on this show. You yourself and I can't say that. Me, myself, and I. You, yourself, and you. There we go. That's 3. And Jason, we'll have your skinny body back on here at some point as well. All right.
Through my friend. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you both, and I appreciate you both so much. Until next time, this has been the Mind Body Business Show with yours truly, Brian Kelly, Annemarie Cross, and Jason Nast. We will see you next time. So long for now.
Thank you for watching and listening. This has been the Mind Body Business Show with Brian Kelly.